All right, so I'm not sure if anybody here has perfect attendance for the entire series so far. If you have, call me out. Do you have perfect attendance? Let's go. Okay. You missed 15 minutes of 1 week because you had to go pick him up. Yeah. So almost. But yeah, everybody's missed at least 1 week, which is cool. Well, it's not cool, but like, you know, it's expected. It's the summer. You guys are busy. You got stuff going on. I completely understand. But since we've had people miss, I just want to give like a quick recap of what's going on here. So if we jump into chapter 4 without giving the recap, some of you might be like, you know, walking into Toy Story 5 in the theater 30 minutes late. And it's like, who's that? I don't know. What's going on? Yeah, what's happening? That's a great movie, by the way. So Paul has been planting churches all over the place, yeah? He planted churches in this region called Galatia, and then he went elsewhere to plant other churches. He gets word back of what's happening in Galatia, and he's like, hey, how my people doing? And whoever sent him the message is like, hey, it ain't going so hot. And he's like, what's happening? And they tell him about these false teachers called the Judaizers. Who said it? Yep, the Judaizers. These are people, high religious types that came from Jerusalem, and they are basically following around where Paul goes, but they're waiting to go until after he leaves so they don't have to actually physically oppose him, yeah? And so they're waiting till he's gone, then they come in and they're like, all right, Paul taught you this, that's awesome, you've got Christ, that's amazing, but you still have to keep the law. There's 600 laws in the Old Testament, you still have to keep all of them. You still have to get circumcised. You still have to offer sacrifices every single time you sin. Paul gets word of that and he's like, that is blasphemous. Not a word of that is true. So he writes this letter to the people of Galatia and you see his pastoral heart come out. That's going to be very true tonight in chapter 4. But he starts out just saying, I'm amazed at how quickly you ran away from the gospel. How quickly you ran away from the truth. You knew it. You knew the gospel, and then this came in and you departed from it, and you went back to where you were. He talks about clashing even with a leader, Peter. This happened in Jerusalem where he saw Peter. As soon as these Judaizers showed up, Peter withdrew from the Gentiles and started only eating with the Jews again. He's like, hey, what is happening here? Like, we have all been saved under one Lord, one faith, one baptism. We are one family now, yeah? Whether Jew or Gentile, we are made one by the blood of Jesus. And then in chapter 3, he starts going back into the Old Testament and starts really theologically defending his argument here. He talked a lot about Abraham. You're going to hear more about Abraham next week when we get into the second half of chapter 4. But a lot of what he's been saying so far, and especially in chapter 3, is there are things that we, for lack of a better phrase, we grow out of. In the past few weeks, we've been transitioning Delcy over to a different seat in the car. You know, she's 6 now, and she's always had the seat in the car where you have to do the shoulder straps. You buckle here, and then you pull them over the legs. You buckle down there too. You know what I'm talking about? Well, now she's in a new seat where she just does the seat belt, okay? And she can do it all on her own. I don't even have to help her get in the car anymore. And she's saying things like, Daddy, I'm a big girl now. And I'm like, shut up. No, you're not, all right? Like, I still want, like, that's the hardest part of being a parent, is like you're teaching a kid how to live without you. Like, that's essentially what it is. And every time they become more independent in something, it's like, I'm so proud of you, but it breaks my heart, right? Because I want to help you. Like, I want to be the one. I want you to need me, you know? That's not what we're talking about tonight. I'm going to start crying if I say that. But you grow out of things, right? Whether it's like a booster seat or the need for a babysitter, a curfew, training wheels on a bicycle, right? We grow out, hopefully we grow out of training wheels on a bicycle. But some of us might, I don't know. But if you think about that, we don't, like, what would you think if you saw like a person my age still riding with training wheels on their bicycle? Like, you would, two very different answers in the group. You'd think something's wrong, okay? Not because the training wheels are bad, it's just the training wheels aren't meant to stay, right? You're meant to move on. You're meant to grow up. You are meant to go on to the next thing, right? And that's the argument Paul's been making since chapter 3. And so this passage in chapter 4, it begins as a continuation of that theological debate that he's been going on in chapters 2 and 3. But the second half tonight, it more morphs into kind of a pastor pleading with the people that he loves. You've been seeing a lot of arguments in the past few chapters, but in this chapter, he starts pleading with his people. And you really start to see his pastoral heart come out. And I'm really excited to talk about that in a minute, but we got to get there first. So we're going to start in verse 1 tonight, and we're going to work our way through. The goal is to get to verse 20. It's going to take a hot minute to get through the first 8 verses, but once we get to like verse 10 or so, it starts to pick up, okay? So Paul has already established that we're justified by faith, yeah? Abraham was saved by faith. He then talks about the law came after Abraham. The law was a guardian. We talked about that at the end of chapter 3. And then he said Christ fulfilled the law. And in the last part of chapter 3, he says there is no Jew or Greek, slave or free, male and female, since you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you belong to Christ, you are Abraham's seed, heirs according to the promise. Heirs are people that have an inheritance that is waiting for them, right? They have an inheritance that is waiting for them. And all believers are sons and heirs, all believers. And now Paul's going to ask, if that is true, why would you ever go back? Why would you ever go back? Let's start in chapter 4, verse 1, and let's run through it. Now I say that as long as the heir is a child, he differs in no way from a slave, though he is the owner of everything. I love the language that he's using talking about sons, right? Children of the Father. One commentary I read in preparation for this, it said, if God had wanted us to be soldiers, he would have sent Jesus as a general. If he had wanted us to be students, he would have sent Jesus as a professor. But God wanted us to be his children, so he sent his son. And this is how we become sons of the Most High God, because of what Jesus did. And it says that as long as the heir is a child, which we are, a child of God, he differs in no way from a slave, though he is the owner of everything. Think about that. It said he is the owner of everything. Imagine a couple weeks ago we brought up Elon Musk. He has a son, right, that has I forget his name, but it's a very interesting name. But he has a son, and legally his son is like unimaginably wealthy, right? His son like is a billionaire before he even turns 18, yeah? Like ridiculously wealthy. But his son still needs permission to eat cookies before going to bed, right? Does he have access to all of that money? No, he's still a child. Paul is saying that Israel lived like this. Everything was promised. Yeah, there was a promise back in Abraham. All nations will be blessed through you, through the seed that comes from you. That seed being Jesus. Very good. And so there was the promise. Everything was promised, but nothing was actually possessed yet. Does that make sense? Verse 2. Instead, he is under guardians and trustees until the time set by his Father. Under guardians and trustees. We actually looked at the word guardian back in chapter 3, verse 24. That said, the law then was our guardian until Christ, so that we could be justified by faith. And so I was looking through and I'm like, okay, so it's the same word in chapter 3. This is why it's important to actually look at the original language. I have apps if you need help with that kind of stuff. But you look at the original language in the Greek, and the word guardian in chapter 3 and the word guardian in chapter 4 are different words. So he's not talking about the exact same thing, even though in English, we don't really have words to perfectly translate, so we just use the same word. But he's talking about two different things here, okay? In chapter 3, the guardian that we talked about, the paedagogos, who remembers that? Yeah? Remember that? This was someone who took after the child as they grew up. Yeah? They watched over them, made sure they were where they needed to be every single part of the day. They were the one that disciplined the child, that corrected the child, but watched them until they were old enough to be an adult, okay? That's the guardian in chapter 3. Now, the guardian in chapter 4 is different. This one is more of, this is fun stuff, right? We're getting in the weeds, right, Ryan? This word, okay, oikonomos. Yeah, you got it? Oikonomos. This one is more of an estate manager. All we need to know for this, because I'm not going to get too far in the weeds, chapter 3, that guardian watches the child. Chapter 4, this guardian watches the inheritance, okay? This one's watching the inheritance, meaning the promise was not going to be lost. The promise that God gave to Abraham was not going to be taken away because there were guardians watching the promise all along, okay? He was protecting that promise all the way through the Old Testament, all the way through the time of Israel, all the way up until Jesus was born. So we get into verse 3, and he says, in the same way also, when we were children, we're in slavery under the elements of the world. Under the elements of the world. Other translations, the one you might have, might say we were enslaved to the elementary principles of the world. Does anybody say that? Yours says that? To the elementary principles of the world. This phrase has puzzled people for a long time, okay? These elemental things, what are they? These, the elements of the world. There are multiple views. I'll walk through them with you real quick. There are some people who think that the elements of the world that we were, when we were children, we were in slavery under. Some people believe that these are physical elements, like earth, wind, fire. What's the last one? Water, yeah. Looking at the context, probably not that, right? Probably not that. A second view, some people think it's spiritual beings or demonic powers. It's possible because Paul uses similar language elsewhere in his letters, so it could be that. In other letters, it is that. But in this letter, if you look at the context of what we're talking about here, the third view is the most likely. When he's talking about the elements of the world, the elementary principles, it's talking about spiritually like the ABCs, spiritual kindergarten, okay? This is a lot of what he's getting at in chapters 3 and 4. So it makes sense that when he says the elements of the world, you were in slavery under the basic things of the world. Imagine someone with a PhD insisting that they only study the alphabet and nothing else, right? That's what Paul's saying here. And what he's getting at, the Judaizers, they believed that they were spiritually advanced. Like, hey, we know more than you, so just listen up and do as we say, yeah? They believed that they were spiritually higher than everyone else, kind of like the Pharisees in Jesus' day, right? But Paul is saying, you think you're spiritually advanced. You've actually gone backwards into preschool. What's that? That's an insult, right? He's insulting these false teachers and Judaizers. He's not afraid to say that. He's calling them out, saying you're actually taking people backwards. You're reverting back to something that can't save you. Now we get into verse 4, and I'd never really studied this verse before I did a deep dive of this book. And I dove into this book probably for 4 months before we had our first meeting. And a lot of it, I was looking at this verse right here, and it was blowing my mind, okay? And I won't be able to get to everything I learned on it tonight, but if you want to know more, you can just ask me. Verse 4, when the time came to completion, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. That, I could do an entire hour and a half just on those two verses, but we have probably 20 to 30 minutes before we need to wrap up, and I still got 17 verses, right? We're not going to be able to dive all the way into this, but to give you kind of the surface level here and help us understand what he's saying, this word where he's saying when the time came to completion, it's this word pleroma. Now this word, when he's talking about completion, or some of your translations might say the fullness of time, he's not just talking about something being full. It means something that's filled completely to the brim. We played a game in youth. This might be before some of y'all were in youth, actually, because it was a hot minute ago. It was a game we saw on social media back in the day where you have this cup and then you have like a pitcher of water. And you line up, one student grabs the pitcher of water and they put some water in the cup. They put it down. The next person comes up. And the goal is you don't want to be the person that puts water in the cup to where water spills over the sides. Yeah? If you do that, you lose. And so by the end, you have people, like it's all the way at the top and you're like doing like one little baby drop, hoping it doesn't spill over. Yeah? What this verse is saying is time was filled, like it was completely to the brim. If one more thing had been put on top, it's spilling over. What does that mean? It means it was the perfect time for Jesus to come. One commentator wrote, history had reached its maximum capacity. Then Jesus came. This means the Father determined for the right time for Jesus to come. One thing I've asked is, in my time of being a believer, just fun questions to ask. We had some fun questions we asked last week at beach camp, but one question I asked is like, why didn't Jesus come like right after Adam and Eve? There's sin. Oh, here's Jesus. Solved it. We're good. Why did he wait? Why didn't he wait until like 2026? Why did Jesus have to come then? Yeah. And when you look at history, that actually was the perfect point in human history for Jesus to be born. Okay? Who was the dominant empire in the world at that time? Rome's. Yeah. Rome's. The Roman Empire. Yeah. A couple things with that make this pretty awesome, actually. A couple things that the Roman Empire wanted to do is they wanted to create a very intricate road system that all centered in the middle of the empire. That's why we have the saying that say all roads lead to Rome. Yeah, that's why they say that. They wanted to create roads to get to anywhere you wanted to go, okay? There are probably other sayings with that phrase, but the original one, all roads lead to Rome. Now, this made it easy to take a message from town to town. What kind of message needed to be spread? The gospel, right? For the first time in human history, there was a road system that could get you anywhere you needed to go. Another thing, the Roman Empire wanted to start spreading a universal language so that no matter where you went, you could communicate with people without a translator, and it made communication and travel a lot easier. This is Koine Greek. That's the Greek that we have a lot of the New Testament written in, yeah? And so there would be no need to translate a message every time it spread further. Does that make sense? Those are two really important things. So people could take a message, they could walk down roads, travel through countrysides, and they could spread the message very easily. But also, they weren't taking videos of Jesus with their iPhones, right? Yeah. I don't think they were around back then. Could be wrong. I don't think they were. Now, if Jesus came in 2026 and someone gets a video of him healing a blind person, what are the comments going to say? AI. They're saying, you photoshopped that. That's CGI. That's AI. Nope, that's fake. There's no way that is real. But back in those days, no camera tricks, no special effects, no AI, right? It was, hey, I saw that guy. He's never walked a day in his life. And he's walking. Like, I know that guy. He's been begging for money outside the temple my entire life. He can't see a thing. And right now, he's looking straight at me and describing my face. Yeah? You can't fake that. Yeah? You can't leave that up to AI or computers. It was the perfect time. It says, when the time came to completion, God sent his son. A cool tidbit on that is God sending his son means his son existed before he was born. It speaks to the preeminence of Jesus, how he is eternal like the Father. Yeah, God sent his son, who was already, a being at that point. Yeah, he did not come into existence when he was birthed by Mary. Cool. And then it says a phrase, born of a woman, born under the law. Now, when we talk about Jesus, this is something we talk about, okay? He was not 50% God and 50% man, yeah? That math just doesn't work theologically. He was 100% God, 100% man. The theological term for this is hypostatic union, if you want to impress your friends or parents or coworkers with that. Hypostatic union. Yeah. Merritt, what'd you learn about at Bible study tonight? Hypostatic unions, Mom. Yeah. And this leads to a lot of fun conversations. We could spend hours talking about the hypostatic union of Jesus, asking questions like, did Jesus ever get sick? Yeah? That's a fun question you can wrestle with for a very long time, actually. We found that out at beach camp. It was like 3 hours, and even got Ricky involved on it. But yeah, think through that one. Give me your answer next week. But this union, it's not a combination, all right? There's nothing else like it. He actually shares attributes with the Father, right? He's God's Son. Heaven is his home. He can do the things the Father has done. One time, one of his disciples, Philip, asked him, will you just show us the Father? Can you just show us who God is? And do you know what he says in response to that? Do y'all know? It's John 14, verse 9. He's saying, like, have I been with you this long and yet you don't see it? If you've seen me, you've what? You've seen him. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. What's he saying there? I and the Father are one. I am him. Yeah? Yeah. He's saying that to his people. He's saying, you've seen the Father. Look at me. Look at what I do. Look what I care about. Look how I treat people. You see me and you know him. Fully God. And then it says he was born of a woman, meaning no man can get credit for his birth. And this is kind of a hard thing to fully grasp and understand. Like I said, we can wrestle with this for a really long time. But it's hard because there's not really a lot of illustrations that we can see on the earth to explain it perfectly. The best one that I found is there's this place called Cape Horn. Anybody ever heard of this? It's outside of South. It's like near Chile, and it's where the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans meet at a specific spot. Y'all might have seen pictures of this before. Yeah. Yeah, so you look at the Atlantic Ocean, there's a very distinct current and temperature. You look at the Pacific Ocean, completely different current and temperature. But there's a spot where the two places meet. And you can see, like from above, okay, I can kind of see where they're meeting, but get down in the water and it's really hard to tell exactly where these waters separate. Like, here's the exact point where they separate. And this is kind of like where Jesus' divine and human nature like meet, without canceling or overwhelming the other out. It's like his I can't get too far into the weeds, but they meet perfectly, like perfect harmony together. Fully God, fully man, fully righteous, but also fully born under the law. And he never broke the law, right? He became a man, and then as Paul said in chapter 3, if you try to hold up the law, you're under a curse. Like, hey, you better hold it perfectly or you're condemned. Break one half of one law, you're condemned. And so as soon as Jesus is born, perfection is the standard and you have to do it. And he was perfect the whole way through. Yeah? This means that when he was a kid, he never once talked back to his mom. Never once hit his brothers, right? Never once did he look at a woman with lust. Never once did he get filled with like sinful anger and rage. Like not once did he sin, right? Like I don't know if I've gone 1 hour without sinning. Like, and I'm saying that as a pastor, yeah? Like to think about that, to think about how he perfectly held up the law. For 33 years, he lived perfect. Why? Why was he placed under the law? Why did it have to be that way? Verse 5 answers it. This is where we're going to kind of start picking up the pace, I promise. Verse 5, he did this to redeem those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. That word redeem, it literally means to buy out of a marketplace. This was commonly used for slaves back in the day. And there was one way where people would buy slaves only to set them free immediately after, okay? They would buy them for their price and then say, all right, I bought you, now you're free, okay? This is what he's saying here. This is exactly what Jesus did. He didn't just buy us, he bought us out. He bought us and then immediately made us free. We're going to see that in chapter 5 in a couple weeks. For freedom, Christ set us free. That's Galatians 5, verse 1. So keep going. Verse 6. And because you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts. One cool thing you see there. What do we see in just that part of verse 6? And because you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. What do we see? Yes, we see the Trinity right there in one verse. It's pretty cool. You see God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. Spirit, Son, Father. Right there. Another one is Jesus' baptism, where you see the Trinity all in one section. Just a couple little tidbits there that are fun. A cool thing about this, though, sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba. Now, this word Abba, we like to just say that it means father, but if you look into their language, it means something more intimate than that. Not just father, it actually translates more closely to what we say as papa, like daddy. Like it's intimate, yeah? He desires to be intimately close with his children. Like this is not just a, like some of us, when we think of a father, it's like we think of like a stern, person like holding us to like a perfect standard. And every time we mess up, it's like I'm afraid to go to my father. That's not how he is here. Abba. This shows how close he is to the child. This is a close father. And I'm telling you, no servant has this. Only sons. And in this verse 7, so you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then God has made you an heir. Do you see the progression here? From a slave to a son to an heir. If this is the progression from going to from a slave to an heir, why would I ever go back? Why would I go back? Why would I choose to go back to that? This is what Paul's going to be hinting at in the next section, and we're really going to see this pastoral side of him come out here, all right? Verse 8. But in the past, since you didn't know God, you were enslaved to things that by nature are not God's. He's reminding him who they were. They were pagans. They were idol worshipers. Just if you're taking notes, just write down Acts 17 and go read that tonight or tomorrow. That's Paul going into a city, and he sees all these idols throughout the town, and it's like countless amounts of idols for every single thing. And they even have one that says, to the unknown God. to where if they had just forgot about a God, they would be like, oh, wait, no, that's this one. Okay, no, we're covered, actually. Yeah, cool. Yeah, we just didn't know his name. We'll write it down now. And Paul's going around, he's saying, hey, I see all these idols. I saw you have one that says to an unknown God. He's like, there's actually a typo there to the unknown God for you. And cool tidbit about that, I actually know him. Would you like me to tell you about him? That's Acts 17 in a nutshell right there. It's a really cool chapter of Scripture. So earlier in Galatians, Paul's talking about being enslaved by the curse of the law. And now he's saying that these people, the Gentiles, were being enslaved by false gods. What he's saying is whether you're enslaved by paganism, like a false god, or whether you're enslaved to legalism, following the rules and earning salvation, either way you're enslaved to something, right? Like you got different chains on, but you're in the same prison, yeah? You try either end of the spectrum, you're still enslaved to something. One side, the people enslaved to paganism are saying, I don't need God. The people enslaved to legalism are saying, I can earn God. Both of these views reject grace. And Paul says, that's where you used to be. And then he gets into verse 9, where he says, but now, since you know God, or rather have become known by God, it's almost like he's correcting himself. It's almost like he's saying, you found God. Wait, no, God found you. That's almost the tone he's taking here. He says, or rather you've become known by God. How can you turn back again to the weak and worthless elements? Do you want to be enslaved to them all over again? The reason you know him is because he took the initiative to know you first. I hope you know that. Isaiah 49 verse 16 says, you are inscribed on the palms of his hands. If you look into the words of Jesus in Matthew 7 at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about people standing before God, and he's going to say to some people, depart from me, for I what? For I, not that you didn't know who I was. Yeah, he never knew you. In the final analysis, when you're in heaven standing before God, it's not whether you know Jesus that matters, it's whether Jesus knows you. And so many of us go to Jesus with a mask on, not letting him see the real us. Go read the story of Jacob back in the book of Genesis. All of his life, he's pretending to be someone that he's not. And he doesn't receive the blessing from God until after he wrestles with God one night and God asks him who he is. And he doesn't say this time, I'm Esau. Remember, he tricked his father and got the inheritance. He said, I'm Jacob. And then as soon as he is honest with God, God says, now I can give you a new name. Now I can speak life into you. Now I can give you a calling and a purpose. As soon as God knows the real you, that is when this abundant life starts flowing. All right. That wasn't in my notes. Maybe we can get to verse 20 now. We'll see. Yeah, a lot of people, we love telling our testimony saying, I found Jesus, and in my brain, I'm like, well, biblically, Jesus found you. So just remember, like, he's the one looking. He's the one finding. He's the one seeking. Because Jesus wasn't lost. You were. Woo, verse 10. Goodness. You are observing special days, months, seasons, and years. This is where we're going to fly through the rest of it. These things he's talking about, they're not sinful things. They're Jewish calendar events. Okay, he's talking about the Sabbath. He's talking about all their festivals, the holy days. He's talking about all these. You're still observing all these things, and he's not attacking these things. He's saying that, you can observe these things, but you're becoming dependent on these things. And when we become dependent on these things and we place our confidence in something other than Christ, and we start putting our confidence in our performance rather than in Christ, that's the point where we can risk missing the gospel. This is one of Paul's big points for the entire letter. And because of this, now we see his heart. Verse 11, I am fearful for you that perhaps my labor for you has been wasted. He's not angry anymore, right? He's scared. Verse 12, I beg you, brothers and sisters, become as I am, for I also have become as you are. He says, become as I am. That means free. Become as I am. Stop living like you're under the law still. And he says, I became as you are. He gave up his Jewish privilege. He gave up all of that and started living like a Gentile because of how Jesus had changed him and so that he could reach them. He says at the end of verse 12, you have not wronged me. You know that previously I preached the gospel to you because of a weakness in the flesh. We aren't exactly told what this weakness, illness, whatever ailment it was. We're not exactly told what it is. There are many theories on it. Malaria was prevalent back in the day. That could be it. He was persecuted a lot, so he probably didn't have the strongest body. He was beaten a lot. He was stoned multiple times. He was shipwrecked 3 times in his life. Like snake bitten, like he had injuries from physical persecution, being thrown in jail multiple times, right? It could be something related to that. My choice for this would be an eye disease. Sounds random, but there are actually a lot of hints that flow to this. One funny one is Galatians 6, same letter, verse 11. He says, look at what large letters I use as I write to you in my own handwriting. All right, I don't know. Let the word speak for itself there. No one knows for sure, but whatever it is, it's likely it's the popular thorn in the flesh that we've heard many times growing up, hopefully. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, another chapter I highly encourage you to read on your own time. But the end of it, it says, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, I'll start in verse 7. Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited or prideful, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me. But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am what? Strong. Woo! That's awesome. He had some thorn in his flesh. He had some ailment. We don't know what it is. But what's fascinating about this is Paul only stayed in Galatia because he was sick. He only stayed because something was ailing him. And if Paul never got sick, maybe Galatia never hears the gospel. And that's kind of a cool thing to think about in our lives, right? Because God can use weaknesses in us to bring more people to himself. Sometimes God closes doors, not so that you'll go find another open door, but that you will start talking to the other people waiting for doors. Yeah? Sometimes God will keep you in the waiting room to talk to everyone else that's waiting. I found that out in my life, and it's so important. Verse 14. You did not despise or reject me, though my physical condition was a trial for you. On the contrary, you received me as an angel of God, as Christ Jesus himself. This says they loved Paul, right? He loved them very much. And now they're abandoning everything he taught. They have false teachers destroying their trust, and this is what is breaking Paul's heart. Verse 15, where then is your blessing? For I testify to you that if possible, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me. That gives further proof to my eye theory, right? He said, you would have torn out your eyes and given them to me. So then, have I become your enemy because I told you the truth? He's like, hey, what happened to you guys? Where then is your blessing? He said, remember your joy? Remember that freedom you had? Remember when grace was amazing to you? Where did that go? What happened? He says they would have torn out their eyes and given them to him. And then he says, verse 16, so then have I become your enemy because I told you the truth? Something I've learned in my life, if you want to start trying it in your life, if you want to know if you're becoming more spiritually mature, something you can ask yourself is, can someone lovingly correct me without me thinking they're now my enemy? Can someone come to me and lovingly bring the word of God to me and rebuke something I'm doing without me now holding resentment against them and feeling differently about that person? That's a big mark of spiritual maturity right there. Verse 17, they, the Judaizers, court you eagerly, but not for good. They want to exclude you from me so that you would pursue them. He's using language like, he's saying they court you. This is almost like someone pursuing a romantic relationship. Why? Because false teachers love attention. They love flattering you. They want to recruit you. They want to isolate you. He said that. They want to exclude you from me. False teachers will often isolate people from healthy community, and that still happens today, unfortunately. Now, verse 19, we're almost done. My children, look, he's been angry this whole letter, right? And now verse 19, my children, I am again suffering labor pains for you until Christ is formed in you. That is wild. That is one of the strongest metaphors he could use, and probably the strongest pain you can feel as a human, yeah? I wouldn't know. He's talking about birth pains here, right? Like, he's thinking about them being born again, yeah? And of course, being born again theologically is not you crawling back into your mother's womb and being born again, yeah? In the exact same way you had nothing to do with your first birth, you have nothing to do with your second birth either, right? You are born again from the Spirit, yeah? And Paul is looking at these people who are born again from the Spirit, and he's picturing himself spiritually giving birth to them again. It's weird, I know. But why is he picturing this? Why is this hurting him so much? It's not because they lost their salvation. It's because Christ is desiring to be formed in them, and they're running away from it. Like, you're now a child of the living God, and you're choosing to still live like a slave that has no inheritance. He wants to see Christ formed in them. He wants to see Christ take shape, not just external behavior, right? He wants to see actual transformation. That word formed there is the Greek word morphao. And it's where we get our word metamorphosis. What he's saying here, he's not after their behavior modification. He's after Christ formation in them. There's a huge difference there because behavior says do better. Formation says become someone new. We are to be transformed, not to run back to who we were. And then verse 20, he says, I would like to be with you right now and change my tone of voice because I don't know what to do about you. Let me tell you, as a youth pastor, the last part of that verse speaks directly to my heart. It's, to be silly, there are some students where I've looked at and I'm like, I don't know what to do about you. But I think there's something really powerful here when we see Paul's heart, because he's admitting uncertainty in this moment. I don't know what to do. Think about that. The Apostle Paul wrote most of the New Testament, a writer of Scripture, like the greatest evangelist that ever lived. And even he can admit, I don't know what to do here. I don't know what to say anymore. That's incredibly human, but as a pastor, I read these last 9 verses, 10 verses, And I tell you, I felt almost everything I read in those last 10 verses. As a pastor, where I'm praying over kids every single night, whereas I'm writing out sermons to preach on Wednesday, I'm thinking through what my students are going through. Like I'm on my knees often for the people of this church, sometimes holding back tears as I'm lifting you up. And then I walk in on Wednesday or a Sunday, and to see that same student running back to where they used to be. You know, we got many leaders in this room. It hurts, right? It hurts to see, because I want nothing more than to see every single student here not become pastors or missionaries, but become people that are faithful to God's word and actually see Christ formed in them. Like, that's what I want to see. And a lot of times it's, you know, I don't know about labor pains, Paul, but a lot of times it does hurt. You know, like, you know, we're at beach camp and there's all these awesome things going on, and I see students talking to leaders, and I see relationships getting a lot closer, and I see students getting stronger and stronger and stronger in their faith. And then, you know, I get back and then I hear what these students were actually saying to their leaders and the things that they're sharing with them, and it just breaks your heart. Because it's like, you know, I had no idea they were going through something like that. And it hurts, you know. I'm sorry I'm getting like really raw and real, but there really are times where I look at students, and at the end of a big weekend or week, like a beach camp, like I'm praying even harder for you guys. You know, yeah, I'm celebrating what God did, but now I'm praying and I'm like, God, please use this as momentum. I pray that what happened right now will be a pillar they put down and say, I'm not going back. Like, this is it. This is the moment where I start to create some traction and momentum to start running and to start seeing you actually be formed in me. And so, as you know, we got students, we've got leaders, we've got adults in the room. You know, you might not be, you know, a pastor or something, but there is something in your life that you have a burden for. I was just talking to one of our students, Jaden. He's not here tonight, but he's probably watching. And but he went up to Hendersonville with me on Friday after we got back. After a whole week of serving and driving back from the beach, like, he said, hey, I'll meet you in Hendersonville when you go pick up the rental van. I'll ride back. You know, I'll pick you up. I'll bring you back. And we talked the whole way back. And one question that came up, because he just graduated high school, and he's like, you know, I'm kind of going into this job with, you know, his uncle, I think, with like electrician job. And he's like, but I want to be a leader in youth. I want to do all these things. I'm not going to tell you everything he said, but essentially it was boiling down to, what is God calling me to do? You know, and I think everyone in this room has probably asked that question. God, what's your will for my life? What's your calling? And I think it boils down to three, and this has probably absolutely nothing to do with Galatians 4. I'm just rambling at this point. But I think it comes down to three things if you're looking for God's will for your life. First thing is ability. What am I good at? What has God gifted me with? What do I have a passion for? What gets me up in the morning and what gives me a drive? Ability. The second thing is affinity. What actually makes my blood boil? What, like, you think about Moses, you know, he had a passion for people. So much so that when he saw an Israelite being beaten in Egypt, what did he do? He murdered a guy. Yeah. Like, I'm not saying, yeah. You know what I'm saying. Like and subscribe. You haven't, yeah. But there are things like when I see a young person that is spiritually an orphan and is left alone to die spiritually, that breaks my heart. That hurts. And I want to do something about it. So like, you have an ability, you have a gift, but what are you actually burdened for? What do you look at and you say, I got to do something about this? Affinity. And number 3, opportunity. What am I good at? What am I burdened for? And what around me allows me to use my ability to ease that burden? If you can do those 3 things, I don't know where it's going to take you, but I know it's a lot closer to God's will than you are right now. If you can start doing those things, what am I good at? What burdens me? And how can I use that ability to ease that burden? Paul knew the word better than anyone. And he desired more than anything to see as many people come to Christ as possible. And so he didn't wait for an opportunity. He went out and made opportunities. He went from town to town and said, I'm going to tell every single person about Jesus that I can. And not just that, I'm not just going to tell them about Jesus and leave them. I'm going to continue writing letters to them after. And I'm going to have a heart for these people and desire to see Christ formed in them. And if it's not happening, it's going to break my heart, and I got to do something about it.